The twin suns of Oralis rose over a city of light and crystal. From the highest tower of the royal palace, Queen Seraphina stood by a wide glass window, her long silver gown catching the morning glow. She was only 23, yet she ruled the most powerful empire in the Andromedan cluster, a place of beauty, science, and hidden fear. Her people called her the Bright Queen because her mind was sharp and her heart strong. But behind her calm eyes, she often wondered if she was ready for the burden she carried. Her father, King Thalon, had died 2 years ago in what the court described as an accident, yet the word never sat right with her. His death had come just as strange signals were being detected from beyond the galactic rim, signals unlike anything they had ever heard. Every morning, she would stand before the window and think about those unknown stars. Her advisors told her to ignore them. The galaxy is full of meaningless noise, they said. But Seraphina had always believed that every sound had meaning. That belief was tested when an urgent call came from the frontier world of CalorPrime. A general entered the throne room, kneeling before her with fear in his voice. "Your Majesty, we found something in the Silver Desert," he said. "A creature, alive but not from any known species. It walks upright, speaks in strange tones, and wears metal cloth over its body. It claims to be human." The word fell heavy in the hall. For generations, the Aurelians had believed that humans were only myths, stories told by explorers who claimed to have seen ancient ruins with words carved in strange letters. Some said humanity had destroyed itself long before Oralis rose to power. Others said they had vanished into the black between stars. Seraphina straightened in her throne, her long hair glimmering under the crystal lights. "A human?" she repeated softly. The general nodded. "Yes, Majesty, but it escaped before we could capture it. It moves swiftly and with purpose." The queen's lips pressed into a thin line. Her council began whispering. Some said it was a trick, others warned of invasion. But Seraphina raised her hand for silence. "Send out search ships," she commanded. "Find this human and bring it to me, alive." The room echoed with the strength of her voice. Her advisors bowed, obeying her order, though worry hid behind their eyes. That night the queen could not sleep. She walked through the royal gardens where luminous plants glowed in shades of blue and gold. The scent of star lilies filled the air, calming her mind but not her thoughts. What if the stories were true? She whispered to herself. What if humanity still exists? She wondered what kind of beings humans truly were. Monsters of war or seekers of peace. The galaxy's old records spoke of them as brilliant, stubborn, and fearless. They had built machines that could move between stars, and their curiosity had once shaken empires. But now, a single one of them had appeared in her domain. The silver desert far away. Under the pale moons of CalorPrime, the one called Human walked alone through the shimmering sand. His name was Elias Ford, commander of a small exploration vessel called Odyssey. His uniform was torn, his face covered with the dust of alien winds, but his steps were steady. He had crash-landed weeks ago while following a strange energy signal. His ship was damaged beyond repair, and the communication systems were dead. He had seen patrol drones in the sky, machines of the Aurelian Empire. He could have hidden, but instead he walked openly, knowing they would find him sooner or later. He had come too far to hide now. Each night he looked up at the twin moons and whispered, "If anyone's listening, I made it. Humanity made it." For centuries, Earth had been forgotten, cut off by the galactic barrier, a massive storm of radiation that separated their part of the universe from the rest. Elias was part of the first mission to cross it. He knew the risk. But what he didn't expect was that he'd end up in the heart of a powerful empire, ruled by a young queen who feared him before even meeting him. As the suns rose on the 7th day, Elias saw the distant glow of a grand city, crystal towers rising like frozen lightning against the sky. He knew it was the capital of Oralis. He smiled faintly. "They're searching for me," he said to himself, "but maybe it's time I stop running." The throne awaits inside the palace. Queen Seraphina prepared for another day of council meetings. Her chambers were bright and filled with delicate architecture, light bridges, floating books, and walls that shimmered like water. Yet she felt restless. Her chief advisor, Lord Kalis, entered and bowed deeply. "Your Majesty, the search continues, but the creature remains at large. Some believe it has left the planet. Perhaps it was a mirage or false reading. Seraphina turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "No, Lord Kalis. I can feel it. The human is still here." Kalis frowned but said nothing. He had served her father and knew better than to argue when the Queen's intuition spoke. Moments later, an alert echoed through the palace. The guards at the outer gates reported movement. Someone, or something, was approaching the royal grounds. Seraphina hurried to the viewing deck where she could see through the transparent shields. There, walking calmly across the shining causeway, was a lone figure in dark, weathered armor. His stride was slow but sure. The guards surrounded him instantly, their spears glowing with energy. "Stop!" shouted the captain. "Identify yourself!" The man raised his hand slightly, showing he carried no weapon. His voice, though tired, carried a calm strength that surprised them all. "My name is Elias Ford," he said, "commander of the human starship Odyssey. I've come to speak with your queen." The guards hesitated. No one dared to move. This was the being their queen had ordered captured. And now, he had walked into the palace by himself. The walk of courage. As the heavy doors of the throne room opened, the murmurs of the court filled the air. The floor sparkled with light, the ceiling painted with images of past rulers. Queen Seraphina sat tall upon her throne, a symbol of youthful strength and wisdom. When Elias entered, the crowd fell silent. His boots echoed softly as he crossed the long hall. His face showed no fear and only a quiet curiosity. He looked at the throne, then at the queen. She had expected a savage creature or a mindless wanderer. But what she saw was a man, weary, scarred by travel, yet standing with dignity. Their eyes met. Neither spoke for several moments. The queen's voice finally broke the silence. "You are on sovereign ground," she said. "You will answer who you are and why you entered my lands without leave." Elias bowed his head slightly, not as a servant, but as a sign of respect. "I didn't come to trespass," he said. "I came to talk." The council members whispered among themselves. The queen's golden eyes narrowed slightly. "Talk? You evade my soldiers, appear in my capital, and expect me to welcome you as a guest?" Elias met her gaze. "If I wanted to hide, your majesty, I would have never walked through your gates." A murmur rippled through the room. Even Seraphina was taken aback by his calmness. She studied him, the way he stood, the steadiness in his voice. He was unlike anyone she had ever met. "Then speak," she said softly. "But understand this, your life rests on the truth of your words." Elias nodded once. "Fair enough." And so began the first meeting between humanity and Oralis, a moment that would change both forever. As the palace guards watched silently, no one could have guessed that this quiet man from a forgotten world would soon reshape the destiny of an empire, not through force or fear, but through the simple courage of walking into danger with open hands. The queen leaned forward slightly, curiosity sparking in her heart. For the first time in years, she felt something rare, not fear or duty, but hope. The great throne room of Oralis remained silent after the strange human's calm words. The courtiers and guards stood still, eyes filled with surprise and suspicion. The queen, seated upon her black crystal throne, watched him closely. Elias Ford stood before her, his uniform torn from travel, but his posture proud. He did not bow low like most who entered the royal hall. He simply stood tall, respectful but unafraid, meeting her gaze directly. That alone unsettled many in the court. Queen Seraphina's golden eyes glimmered under the light streaming from the dome above. "You say you came to talk," she said, her voice calm but sharp. "Yet you have entered my palace uninvited. Why should I allow a trespasser to speak?" Elias's tone was steady. "Because what I have to say may change the way you see your own empire." A quiet gasp passed through the room. Lord Kalis, her chief advisor, stepped forward angrily. "How dare you speak so to our queen? You stand before the ruler of Oralis and you show no respect." Elias turned his head slightly toward Kalis. "I show respect by being honest," he replied. "If your queen values truth, she will listen." The hall erupted with murmurs. The queen raised her hand and silence returned. She found herself curious. This human spoke without fear, without flattery, without arrogance. There was something strangely pure about his manner. "Very well," she said at last. "You will speak. But know this, lies or threats will mean your end." Elias nodded once. "Understood." A stranger's story. 2 guards led Elias to stand closer to the base of the throne. He glanced around the hall. The murals told stories of Oralis's long rule, of empires conquered and stars claimed. The Aurelians were proud of their power, but Elias could sense a shadow of unease in their beauty. "I am Commander Elias Ford," he began. "I come from a planet called Earth, far beyond your known systems. My people have been cut off from the rest of the galaxy for centuries because of a great barrier, a storm of energy that blocked our ships and signals. We thought we were alone in the universe. But recently the storm weakened, and I led a mission to cross it. I came to explore, not to invade." Serafina listened carefully. His voice was quiet but carried conviction. "Why cross into unknown space?" she asked. "Your world could have stayed safe." Elias gave a faint smile. "Because staying safe is not the same as living. Humans have always looked beyond what we know. Curiosity is our nature." His answer made her pause. It was such a simple statement, yet it carried weight. Lord Kalis frowned deeply. "Curiosity? Or conquest? Every species that has expanded across the stars has done so for control, not friendship." Elias looked directly at him. "Then maybe it's time someone proved otherwise." The Queen's lips curved slightly, though she hid it quickly. She saw no sign of deception in him, only honesty. Still, she could not ignore her duty. "Your ship?" she asked. "Where is it now?" "Crashed," Elias replied. "I lost it when I entered this sector. I had no choice but to travel here on foot." A murmur spread through the court again, shock mixed with disbelief. The silver deserts of Kalor Prime were deadly for most beings, yet this human had survived alone. "You crossed the silver desert?" the Queen asked softly. "Yes," Elias said. "Your guards looked for me. I saw their patrols. But I wasn't hiding. I was looking for you." That made her lean back slightly. "You wish to be captured?" "No," he said with a faint chuckle. "I wished to be heard. But I knew I'd never be allowed near your court unless I walked here myself." Serafina's counselors whispered again, calling him reckless, dangerous, or mad. But in her heart she felt something different. She saw courage, and something even rarer, sincerity. A queen's dilemma. When the audience ended, Queen Serafina ordered that Elias be kept under palace watch. He was not to be harmed, but he would remain within the guest chambers until she decided what to do. That night, as the stars filled the glass ceiling above her quarters, Serafina sat alone in thought. Her advisors urged her to interrogate the human more harshly, to learn his secrets, but her instincts told her there was more to this than fear. She turned to her reflection in the crystal mirror. The young face that looked back at her was calm, but her mind was storming. "A human," she whispered. "A living myth." She recalled his words, because staying safe is not the same as living. Her father had once told her something similar. The galaxy is not for those who fear the unknown, my daughter, but for those who dare to understand it. Perhaps this man, this Elias Ford, was not a threat but a test. The human guessed the next morning. The Queen visited the observation balcony overlooking the inner garden. There she saw Elias walking under guard among the glowing trees and crystal flowers. He was examining the plants closely, speaking softly to one of the guards. The guard seemed unsure how to respond. When Serafina appeared, everyone bowed except Elias. He simply turned to her, offering a small nod of respect. "Your Majesty," he greeted. "You seem comfortable for someone under guard," she said with a faint smile. He smiled back slightly. "I don't believe in cages even when they have golden bars. I'm here because I want to be." The Queen raised an eyebrow. "That is an unusual view for a prisoner." Elias shrugged. "Maybe I don't feel like one." She walked beside him, the guards keeping a respectful distance. "You are far from your world," she said. "Do you not miss it?" "Every second," Elias replied. "But discovery means leaving something behind. My people sent me to learn, to build bridges, not walls." The Queen studied him quietly. "You speak as if you carry the voice of your whole species." He looked toward the shining trees. "Maybe not their voice, but their hope. If I fail, they might never try again." For a brief moment, Serafina saw something human in herself, a shared loneliness, a shared duty. She had become queen too young, forced to prove herself every day. He too carried the weight of a world on his shoulders. Words in the night that evening, she invited him to dine in a small chamber instead of leaving him alone. The table was simple but elegant, filled with fruits and glowing dishes from Oralis's oceans. As they ate, she asked, "What was Earth like?" Elias smiled faintly. Not perfect, but beautiful. Blue skies, deep oceans, forests that breathe life. We heard our world once, but we learned to care again. Every planet we see now reminds us of home. The Queen listened, fascinated. And your people? Are they like you? He thought for a moment. In some ways, yes. We fight sometimes. We make mistakes. But we also dream. And when humans dream, they build wonders. We're small compared to your empire, but we never stop reaching for more. There was admiration in his tone, but not arrogance. He spoke as someone who loved his species for their courage, not their power. The Queen found herself smiling without meaning to. You speak of your people as if they were a story worth believing in. Elias met her eyes. Maybe they are. The Queen's decision. When the dinner ended, Seraphina dismissed the guards and walked with Elias to the edge of the balcony. The stars stretched across the dark sky like rivers of silver. You came here at great risk, she said softly. Why trust a ruler you don't know? Elias turned to her, his expression calm. Because if we spend our lives fearing each other, nothing will ever change. Someone has to take the first step, the Queen's heart stirred. His words reminded her again of her father's lessons. She looked at him and said quietly, You are a strange man, Elias Ford. Most beings tremble when they stand before a throne. Yet you look at it as if it were only a chair. He smiled. Because power doesn't come from a chair, Your Majesty. It comes from the choices made while sitting in it. She stood silently for a moment, letting his words sink in. Then she nodded to the guards. Commander Ford will remain here under protection, not imprisonment. He is to be treated as a guest until further notice. The guards looked confused but obeyed. As Elias bowed his head slightly, Seraphina turned to leave. But before stepping away, she said one last thing without looking back. Perhaps you were right, human. Curiosity and courage may not be so different after all. And with that, she left the chamber, her long robe trailing behind her like a streak of light. That night, as Elias gazed out over the shining city, he whispered to himself, maybe we're not as far from understanding each other as we think. The palace of Oralis had never felt so alive. Since the arrival of the human, Commander Elias Ford, every corridor seemed filled with whispers and questions. The courtiers spoke his name in secret tones, the scholars debated his words, and the Queen herself found her thoughts often returning to him. Queen Seraphina tried to focus on her royal duties, but her mind drifted. There was something about this human that challenged the way she saw her world. His calm eyes, his steady voice, his way of speaking truth without fear. It was unlike any diplomat or noble she had ever known. That morning, as the golden suns of Oralis rose above the city's silver towers, Seraphina stood on her balcony. She watched the ships drift in the sky, leaving trails of light across the horizon. The city glowed like a jewel under her rule, perfect, peaceful, and yet quiet. Too quiet. Her empire was strong, yes, but it was built on control and caution. Every citizen followed the same pattern, every decision made by order and law. No one questioned, no one dreamed. But now, after hearing Elias speak of Earth, she wondered if her perfect world had lost something precious, something called freedom. Conversations across worlds later that day, Seraphina visited the royal library where Elias was allowed to stay, and read under the watch of 2 guards. The room was vast, filled with floating books and glowing data crystals. Elias was studying a holographic star map when she entered. He turned to her and smiled. Your library is incredible, he said. Some of these records are older than my planet's written history. Seraphina walked closer, her gown sweeping the floor. You read quickly for someone unfamiliar with our script, she remarked. I learn fast, Elias replied. Humans are good at adapting. It's one of the reasons we survived so long. She folded her hands in front of her. Survived? You make it sound as if your world has suffered. Elias looked at the glowing stars before him. It did. We faced wars, hunger, even times when we thought we wouldn't make it. But every time we rebuilt, we learned. We hoped. There was quiet admiration in his tone, but no pride. Seraphina found herself listening with more attention than she expected. And now you travel across the stars, she said softly. To what end? Elias looked at her with calm eyes. To connect. To remind the universe that humans are still here, and that we can be more than our past. The Queen studied him for a long moment. You speak like a leader, she said finally. I'm just a man with a mission, Elias replied. But leadership? It's about more than commanding. It's about inspiring others to believe again. Her gaze softened. You sound like my father, she admitted quietly. He once said that a true ruler doesn't lead through fear but through trust. Elias smiled gently. Then he must have been a wise man. Seraphina nodded slowly, though her eyes carried a shadow of sorrow. He was. Until the day he died, I never questioned him. But after his death, everything became uncertain. There was silence between them for a while, filled only by the soft hum of the library's energy lights. Finally, Elias said, Doubt is not weakness, Your Majesty. It's the beginning of understanding. Those words lingered in her heart long after she left the room. The scholars' curiosity days passed, and Elias continued to amaze the Aurelian scholars. They questioned him about Earth science, technology, and history. His knowledge was vast, yet what impressed them most was his imagination. He explained how humans once dreamed of touching the stars, long before they even had ships. He showed them drawings from old memory files, images of cities built in clouds, oceans covered with floating gardens, and stations orbiting suns. One scholar, astonished, asked him, Why dream so far when your world already gives you enough? Elias smiled. Because dreaming keeps us alive. When humans stop dreaming, we stop being human. The queen, who had come quietly to listen, felt something stir inside her again. She realized how rare it was for anyone in Oralis to speak of dreams. Her people had everything: comfort, order, safety. But maybe, just maybe, they had lost the spark that made life exciting. After the session, she spoke to Elias privately. You speak as if hope is your greatest weapon. Elias chuckled softly. Hope is our greatest weapon. It's how we fight fear. When the world turns dark, humans light a candle. Seraphina looked thoughtful. And what if that candle goes out? Elias met her eyes. Then we light another. Her heart felt strangely lighter hearing those words. The hidden wounds one evening. Seraphina invited Elias to the high observatory, a transparent dome that looked out into the endless night. The two stood side by side, stars shining above them like a sea of silver fire. For a long time, neither spoke. The silence between them felt peaceful, not awkward. Finally, the queen said, My father once told me that the stars watch over us, that they remember every act of courage and kindness. Elias smiled. On Earth, we say something similar, that the stars are the stories of those who dared to dream. She turned to him. Your words, they make me wonder if our worlds are not so different. They aren't, Elias replied softly. Every being, no matter their world, fears the unknown, but only a few are brave enough to walk toward it. Seraphina looked down for a moment. Sometimes I feel trapped by my crown. I must always appear strong even when I'm uncertain. If I show weakness, the council whispers. If I question tradition, they call me reckless. Elias's voice was gentle. Maybe they fear change more than they fear weakness. But the universe doesn't wait for anyone, Queen Seraphina. Sooner or later, change always comes. She looked at him, her golden eyes reflecting the starlight. You speak as if you've known such struggles yourself. I have, he said simply. On my planet, I was often told that peace was impossible, that unity was a dream. But I kept believing that people can rise above fear. Maybe that's why I'm here now, to prove it. For a long time, the queen said nothing. Then she whispered, Perhaps you were meant to come. Elias looked at her with calm gratitude. Or perhaps we were meant to meet. The seeds of change over the next few days, the queen began to change in subtle ways. Her advisors noticed she listened more carefully, questioned old customs, and spoke of peace with unusual warmth. The council grew nervous. Lord Kaelis approached her one afternoon. Your Majesty, he said carefully, the human's presence is affecting your decisions. He speaks with charm, but remember, he represents a species we know nothing about. We must remain cautious. Seraphina met his gaze firmly. I am cautious, Lord Kaelis. But I am also curious. If humanity has survived everything it faced, perhaps there is something to learn from them. The advisor bowed but left with unease in his eyes. That night, alone in her chamber, Seraphina looked out at the stars again. She thought of Elias, his calmness, his words, his unshakable hope. Her heart told her that his arrival was not a coincidence. It was a sign. The universe was offering her a chance to lead not just through strength, but through understanding. The question of trust. One morning, she visited Elias again, this time in the Garden of Light where streams of glowing water flowed between silver trees. He was sitting beside a pool looking at his reflection. "Do you ever feel afraid?" she asked as she sat beside him. Elias looked at her, surprised by the question. "Of course," he said honestly. "Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing to move forward despite it." She nodded slowly. "And you walked willingly into my palace knowing you might never leave." "Why?" "Because someone has to take the first step toward peace," he said. "If I had waited for you to come to me, it might never happen. But by walking into your throne room, I showed trust. Maybe that's the start of understanding." The queen looked at him thoughtfully. "You risked everything for trust?" Elias smiled faintly. "Yes. Trust is the foundation of everything worth building." For a long time they sat in silence, listening to the soft hum of the garden. And in that quiet moment, the young queen realized something deep within her heart. Elias Ford was not just a visitor from another world. He was a mirror, showing her what her empire had forgotten. That real strength is not found in control, but in compassion. A new light. That night, Seraphina returned to the royal hall where her father's old throne stood. She touched its smooth surface, thinking of how much had changed in only a few weeks. A human, a single ordinary man, had done what no council or fleet could do. He had made her question everything she thought she knew about power. She looked up at the great banners of her empire and whispered, "Perhaps the future of Auralis will not be written in commands, but in understanding." Outside the palace, the twin suns sank beyond the horizon, painting the sky with gold and violet light, and high above the stars shimmered as if listening to her vow. Far away in the quiet guest quarters, Elias looked out at the same sky. "We're not so different after all," he murmured. And for the first time in many generations, two worlds separated by fear began to feel a little closer beneath the same stars. The royal palace of Auralis stood under the silver glow of its twin moons. The Queen City never slept. Lights of crystal towers reflected across the capital skies, and the hum of energy airships echoed like a song of progress. But tonight something darker moved beneath the surface, a storm that had nothing to do with weather. Queen Seraphina stood on her high balcony, dressed in a soft blue robe that shimmered with threads of light. Her mind was restless. The human, Elias Ford, had been in the palace for weeks. Every conversation with him had left her more thoughtful, more uncertain about her advisor's warnings. His words echoed in her heart. "True power," he had said softly, "is not about being feared. It is about being trusted." Seraphina sighed. She had ruled since she was 17, but even after 6 years she still felt the weight of every choice. Her council had always spoken of control, order, and strength. But Elias spoke of compassion, hope, and courage. Those words sounded dangerous to them, but to her, they sounded right. As she stood in thought, a soft knock came at her chamber door. "Enter," she said gently. Her handmaiden Alira stepped in, bowing quickly. "Your Majesty," she said, her voice nervous. "The High Council meets in secret tonight." "They said it was about the human." Seraphina turned sharply. "Without my permission?" Alira nodded, fear in her eyes. "Yes, my queen, they plan to act before you can stop them." For a moment, Seraphina felt cold inside. The council was made up of 12 old lords and scholars who had guided the throne for generations. They had stood beside her father, and they often reminded her of her youth. But now she realized they did not see her as their ruler. They saw her as a child still learning. "What are they planning, Alira?" Seraphina asked quietly. "I heard whispers. They plan to end the human's life tonight. They call it a security measure." The queen's eyes widened. "They would dare execute him without my word?" Alira hesitated. "They say it is to protect Auralis." Seraphina's voice became firm, almost trembling with anger. "Protect Auralis? Or protect their pride?" She turned and walked quickly toward the door. "Prepare my royal guards. We ride to the detention hall immediately." Meanwhile, deep below the palace, Elias Ford sat in his cell. The room was not a dungeon. It was clean and lit softly by crystal light. He had been treated fairly, though always watched closely. He didn't fear the guards, but he did sense something strange in the air tonight. Through the clear glass wall of his chamber, he could see 2 guards talking quietly. Their faces looked tense. One kept glancing toward the far door where shadows moved. Elias had learned to read people. He had been a soldier, a diplomat, and a leader once. The signs of danger were familiar. His instincts told him something was wrong. He closed his eyes, breathing deeply. So this is how it ends? He whispered to himself. Not with a battle, but with silence. But there was no anger in his voice. Only calm acceptance. He had chosen to walk into the Queen's palace unarmed, ready for whatever came. If his death could open peace between their worlds, then perhaps it was worth it. In the grand meeting chamber above, 12 figures gathered around a glowing table. The High Chancellor spoke first, his voice low and steady. This human has bewitched the Queen. He must be removed before he poisons her mind further. A senior general nodded. She is young, impressionable. We cannot risk her turning the throne into a place of weakness. A scholar added bitterly. She listens to his talk of trust and compassion as if it were wisdom. But compassion does not rule empires. Power does. The Chancellor lifted his hand. Then it is settled. The human dies tonight. The Queen will be told in the morning that he resisted interrogation. A necessary loss, all 12 nodded. None spoke of mercy. But fate had other plans. Seraphina's aircar descended into the lower halls just as the guards were preparing the energy lances near Elias's chamber. Her golden armor shone as she stepped out, her eyes blazing like fire. Behind her, 20 royal guards followed in perfect formation. The soldiers guarding Elias turned in shock. Your Majesty? Stand down, Seraphina commanded, her voice cutting through the silence like thunder. Who gave the order to kill my guest? One of the guards stammered. The council, my queen, they said. I do not care what they said, she interrupted coldly. The council does not overrule the throne. The guards hesitated, uncertain. Then from the far corridor the High Chancellor himself appeared, flanked by 2 council generals. He bowed stiffly. Your Majesty, please. We only acted for your safety. My safety? She said sharply. By murdering a man who came here in peace? The Chancellor lifted his chin. That creature is dangerous. You are blinded by his words. Seraphina stepped closer, eyes bright with fury. If wisdom blinds me, then I will remain blind forever. But if cruelty is sight, then I would rather be in darkness. For a long moment, silence filled the hall. The council members did not move, but their faces turned pale. The Queen turned toward her guards. Protect Commander Ford, she ordered. Anyone who disobeys will answer to the crown. Elias watched everything quietly from his cell. He could hear her voice, calm, clear, filled with purpose. He had seen many leaders in his lifetime, but none quite like her. When the guards opened his door at her command, he stepped forward. The Queen looked at him, her eyes softening. You should have left when you had the chance, she said. He smiled faintly. You knew I wouldn't. Why? She asked quietly. Because if we ever want peace, Elias replied, someone has to stand firm. Sometimes standing firm means not running. Her lips curved into a small smile. Then perhaps I should learn from you. But the danger was not over. As they began to leave the detention area, a sudden explosion echoed from the upper levels. The power lights flickered. The Queen's guards drew weapons instantly. The Chancellor shouted, She's turning against the Council. Stop her! The soldiers loyal to the Council aimed their energy spears, while those loyal to the Queen formed a wall around her and Elias. For a heartbeat, the palace trembled with tension. Then Seraphina raised her voice again, strong and proud. No more fear. No more lies. From this moment, Oralis will stand for truth, not tyranny. The words spread through the corridors. Many guards lowered their weapons, inspired by her courage. Others fled, unwilling to fight against their queen. In the end, the council's rebellion fell apart before it began. The few who resisted were arrested peacefully. No blood was shed that night. Only pride and arrogance were broken. Hours later, the palace was quiet again. Seraphina and Elias stood together on the balcony overlooking the shining city. The twin moons rose higher, bathing everything in soft silver light. Elias looked at her, seeing both strength and kindness in her young face. You could have let them do it, he said. You would have kept your throne safe. Seraphina shook her head slowly. A throne built on fear is never safe. You taught me that, he smiled softly. I only reminded you of what you already knew. She looked up at the stars then, her heart strangely light. Do you think our worlds can really walk together? Humans and Aurelians? Elias followed her gaze. If a queen can stand against her own council for what is right, he said quietly, then anything is possible. That night, A news story began to spread across the Empire. The tale of a young queen who defied her council and a human who refused to fight back. Together, they had shown that courage was not always about weapons or wars. Sometimes it was about standing firm in peace. And though the stars of Oralis were silent, the galaxy had heard their echo, the first whisper of a new dawn. The first light of Oralis's twin suns painted the crystal towers in gold and silver. After the events of the previous nights, the palace was calm but buzzing with quiet anticipation. Word had spread quickly. The human, Elias Ford, was no longer just a guest. He had earned the trust of the queen, and that trust had reshaped the palace's mood. Queen Seraphina moved through the corridors with a sense of purpose she had never known before. The council had been reformed. Those loyal to old fear had been sent to observe the outer colonies under supervision, and the advisors now spoke carefully, knowing that their words must be wise and just. Elias had been invited to the main hall again, but this time it was not for questioning or observation. It was a meeting, a discussion of what could be built between two worlds that had never truly met. Building bridges, the hall was wide and bright, lined with floating platforms and illuminated maps of the galaxy. Seraphina stood at the center, the young queen who had proven her strength, while Elias spoke with scholars and engineers, sharing knowledge from Earth. "What is this device?" one Aurelian asked, pointing to a small cube of shimmering metal. Elias held it carefully. "This is a portable energy generator. On my world, we use it to power entire cities safely. You could adapt it to your fleet or your colonies and it wouldn't harm anyone." The scholars leaned closer, fascinated. Seraphina watched as Elias explained with clarity and patience, answering every question. His knowledge of mechanics, energy, and star navigation was astonishing. He had survived alone in the deserts, yet he had come prepared to share, to teach, and to connect. "Humans do not conquer through fear," he said, addressing the room. "We survive through cooperation, curiosity, and trust. You have knowledge beyond our reach, and together, we could achieve even more. We do not seek control. We seek understanding." Seraphina felt a glow of pride and admiration, not just for him but for what he represented. She realized that humanity, despite being small in numbers, had a power all their own, the courage to stand openly, to risk everything for a vision of a better future. Messages across the stars as preparations continued. The Queen and Elias worked together to send messages to Earth. Communication had been blocked for centuries by the galactic barrier, but with Oralis technology, the signals could now reach the distant planet. Elias wrote carefully, sending messages of peace, friendship, and hope. The first signals carried greetings from a civilization that humans had thought lost forever, and news of a galaxy willing to listen. "Will they believe us?" Seraphina asked quietly, watching him. "They will," he replied confidently. "If there is one thing humans never give up, it is hope." The Queen smiled. She had never known a human before, but now she saw what her advisors could not. Humans were fearless not because they lacked danger, but because they believed in what was right. The departure of the Odyssey days later. The repaired ship Odyssey stood ready on the launch pad, its metal gleaming under the twin suns. A crowd gathered, watching quietly as the human prepared for departure. He had formed bonds with many Aurelians, sharing stories, teaching, and even helping design new ways to protect their cities without weapons. Seraphina approached him at the starport, her silver robe flowing in the gentle wind. Elias turned and smiled. "You have changed a galaxy," she said softly. "Your courage and honesty have reminded me of what leadership truly is." Elias bowed slightly. "You could have turned me away or harmed me. Instead, you listened, you questioned, and you acted with wisdom. That is why this is possible, Your Majesty." She looked at him, her golden eyes bright with emotion. "Will you return?" she asked. Elias shook his head gently. "I must go back to my people, but I will carry your words with me. And when humanity looks to the stars, we will remember Oralis and its queen who chose trust over fear. A farewell with promise." The Queen placed a hand on the ship's hull, feeling its energy hum beneath her fingers. "You walked into a throne room without weapons," she said. "Most would call that foolish." Elias smiled faintly. "Sometimes the strongest act is to trust, and sometimes it is the only way to build bridges that last." The launch crew activated the engines. A gentle vibration ran through the ground. Elias turned to her one last time. "Tell your people," he said, that humans are not conquerors. We seek friends, allies, and understanding. Tell them we stand with those who do the right thing." Seraphina nodded solemnly. "And I will tell mine that courage can take many forms, even a quiet walk into a throne room." The engines roared to life. Light filled the launch pad. The Odyssey lifted slowly, rising above the city, and then with a powerful burst shot into the stars. The crowd cheered, but Seraphina remained silent, watching the trail of light. The Queen's reflection. After the departure, the palace felt different. Seraphina walked through the halls, remembering the past weeks, the doubts, the lessons, the courage of a human who risked everything to speak the truth. She realized something profound. Ruling an empire was not about fear or obedience. It was about vision, understanding, and the willingness to stand for what was right, even when others did not. The council had learned too. They saw that courage could come in forms they had never expected, not from armies or commands, but from honesty and moral strength. The human had not fought them, yet he had changed their world more than any general could have. The young queen understood now that leadership required more than strategy. It required trust, hope, and the courage to do what was right. A new dawn weeks passed, and the signals sent to Earth were answered. Messages of friendship returned, and plans for collaboration between humans and Aurelians began. Trade, knowledge, and exploration routes were established. What had seemed impossible just months ago was now taking shape before Seraphina's eyes. The city of Oralis shone brighter than ever. People moved freely, inspired by the stories of the human who walked unarmed into the throne room. The story of Elias Ford became a symbol, not of conquest but of courage, trust, and hope. Seraphina often stood on the balcony at night, gazing at the stars. She thought of Elias, of Earth, and of the new bridges being built between worlds. For the first time in her reign, she felt something she had never felt before: certainty in her purpose. "The galaxy is vast," she whispered to herself, "but no distance is too great when courage and trust light the way." The legacy of courage years later. Historians would write of the events that began with a simple choice. A young queen chose to protect a human, not as a prisoner but as a guest. A human chose to walk unarmed into a throne room, trusting a ruler he had never met. Together they changed the course of history. The tale of their meeting spread across galaxies. Humans and Aurelians learned from one another, sharing knowledge, art, and culture. Empires that had once feared the unknown now saw potential in cooperation and understanding. And though Elias had returned to Earth, the memory of his courage lingered on Oralis, a quiet, shining example that even one person, acting with trust and honor, could shift the course of an empire. Seraphina ruled for decades, always guided by the lessons of that human who had shown her that true strength was not in weapons, armies, or fear, but in hope, trust, and courage. Final words in the end. The Odyssey became a legend, not because it carried humans across the stars, but because it carried a message that empathy, honesty, and bravery can unite worlds that seem impossibly far apart. And as the twin suns rose over Oralis each day, the people remembered the story of the human who walked into a throne room willingly, and the young queen who had the courage to listen, a story that would inspire generations to come. The galaxy, vast and mysterious, now had a new light shining across it, a light of friendship, courage, and hope. The end.